Hi everyone. Today I want to talk to you about the history of our education system. We don't often stop and think, where did this come from? I was a little bit shocked when I learned about it, but let me take you back a step in my life. I've been a government worker for, 16 years. So how did I even get into homeschooling to begin with? I started realizing as my son was in preschool that we don't have a lot of rights as parents when our kids are in these institutions. And even though it was a private preschool, I still didn't have a lot of say in things they put on his hands, the hand sanitizer, the masking, things on the CDC schedule. And I really took a step back and thought about, this is my child. Why don't I have a say in anything about him anymore? And I set out on a journey to learn more about homeschooling because at that time I just figured, well, all homeschoolers are weird. They spend their time sewing and whittling. And, now these are traits that I wish I had. But I didn't think that my world really could fit into the homeschooling world. So I started a podcast interviewing homeschooling families to learn all the ways there is to homeschool. And now it's been 2 years and I have decided to quit my job, homeschool the kids, and really immerse myself in this sort of movement to make people understand that the traditional school system is not the only way. In fact, it shouldn't be the way at all. All right, so let's dive in. Where did this idea of the education system start? How were people educated prior to this, prior to these cement school buildings that we just send our kids in for 8 hours a day? Well, when we look back at history, and we can go back as early as, I think, 6000 BC, people were educating their children through family and community. You taught your kids what they needed to know to survive, know where to find food, water, shelter. You sort of picked up on the trades or raised your family accordingly. When we look at the model that we have today for school, it really extends only back a couple hundred years ago. So there was a Prussian model that started this, and the idea was that they wanted to shift the thinking of their youth. And Horace Mann, in about 1840, took this Prussian model of the education system and brought it to America. From there, John Dewey implemented it further. And lo and behold, the Rockefellers said, we will invest millions of dollars in this model as well. Now, let me just ask you this. Why would oil tycoons want to invest millions of dollars into the education system, even creating the Board of Education, if it was going to produce people that would be competitors to their business? They're not going to do that. So what the Rockefellers did was said, we'll invest our millions, but put some of our people on the board just so we can monitor what they're teaching. So the idea of giving children an equal opportunity for their education was never actually the purpose of the school system. It has always been to create the obedient worker, smart enough to do the job, but not smart enough to question it, and not smart enough to become competitors. I think for me, that was step one at deschooling myself, was realizing that this was set up by design. And I fell for it. In the 60s and 70s in America, we had what you would know today as the women's movement. We wanted liberation, right? We wanted to burn our bras and get out there and not be chained to our kitchens. But what were the consequences of this? And what was the true intention behind it to begin with? Well, the women's movement actually doubled the tax base. So now the government was collecting pretty much double what they were with just the men going to work. But what happened to our kids when we went to work? The kids now had to go into institutionalized daycare and school for even longer. So, when we think about communities educating our kids at home, they would just be part of the everyday tasks that you would do. Farming, taking care of the family, cooking. Then we went into the one-room schoolhouse. Well, now you had a whole group of kids and they were all different ages. So you had an 8-year-old was looking up to the 13 and 14-year-old, and the 13 and 14-year-old were actually learning from teaching the 8-year-old what they knew and being good models. So this was actually a beautiful way to learn, to have children of all different ages. I mean, you can easily teach a subject to multiple grade levels or ages and just vary the level of difficulty, but that didn't last for long, right? The one-room schoolhouse kind of went out the window over the years, especially as more kids started going to school. And now we have developed more of the factory-style schooling. So students move with the bells. They're segregated by age and by subject. The purpose of this was to normalize is the hierarchical control and prepare children for factory life. This should be getting you kind of mad and thinking, why would I have ever put my kid in this institution, right? But we don't know because it's sold to us as equal opportunities for all children all across the country. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. Now, what were the consequences of women going into the workforce and this sort of factory style model for schooling? Well, there was definitely a loss of family connection. The shift from the home-based education to institutional schooling, it really robbed families of time and autonomy. I mean, when you just think of the rushed morning, I used to send my kid to daycare and preschool, and I ran off to work to sit in a cubicle. Rushing your child out of bed when they are maybe going through a developmental change or fighting off an infection or, some sort of bacteria. They need that extra time, that extra sleep. And we're robbing them of that every time we pull them out of bed before they're ready and bring them off to school. So these early drop-offs, rushed mornings are really sacrificing the child's natural development. Not to mention all the time that's spent waiting for the bus to come, waiting for the bell to ring, waiting for the class to settle down, waiting for attendance, waiting to catch up on what you had gone over yesterday so that you can start today's lesson. And like I said before, the breakup of all these subjects where we could actually merge a lot of these subjects together and save a lot of time by learning, maybe you're learning math with cooking, or you're learning history and geography and science and reading and writing all in one project. But the school system wouldn't be able to do that because one, there's just too many kids, and two, there's no way to measure at that point. Standardized testing and funding has become a huge part of the education system today. I have interviewed countless teachers on my podcast who have left the school system to home educate their children. When the first teacher contacted me saying, I'm a teacher, I left the school system, I thought this was like groundbreaking news. A teacher left the school system to home educate? This is crazy. Now, 2 years in, I have interviewed so many teachers that are inside, saw the system and said, not my kid. I was just talking to one teacher last night. She's actually created a micro school or learning center in upstate New York, and this has happened across the country. So there's never been more opportunities to give our children a more beautiful childhood and a more beautiful education than there are today. When we look at the testing, why? What is the point? What is the point? It's to measure how teachers are doing and how students are doing, and not to measure how much they're actually learning, but how much is going on in the day. They have our children from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at least. And if we don't have testing, we don't have any way to measure what's going on with our tax dollars all day long. And now it's tied to funding, and the funding has gotten so ridiculous. The schools that are having the lowest test scores are the ones that get the least amount of money. Does that make any sense? And the ones that have the highest test score get more money? So that just goes to show you right there, this was never about equality for everybody. Now, I'm not gonna say that if you homeschool, you'll never have to give your child the test, because in many states there are still requirements that we have to meet as homeschoolers, but go to hslda.org, put in your state and see what the requirements are, because it might only be testing every other year. When you take a step out of the societal norms and you actually just observe your child in everyday life, you're going to see what sort of questions they ask. There will be things through books or on the TV or through an experience with friends or a family trip that you took somewhere where they're going to ask questions and want to know more about something. And that's going to be what drives you to push them further into, this is how we learn about it. So something as simple as, my son loves remote control cars, but they're always breaking. So he's always taking them apart, figuring out what piece is broken, ordering the piece. That's where we go into, well, how much money do you need from your bank account? We're subtracting it from his bank account total. We're ordering the part, then he's installing it, then he's putting the car back together, and now he's going to see the value of $1, a little bit of math, a little bit of science, technology. There's so many things you can incorporate into this. Have them watch a documentary on it, watch something on YouTube about it, take out some children's books about how cars are put together, or even reading a manual to him. Countless subjects that you can work on while having the topic be centered around something that interests your child. This has been the biggest realization for me. I remember thinking, well, if we homeschool, what would we even do all day? Because if school only takes an hour when they're young, what am I going to do the rest of the time? And I can honestly say our days go by. I might never open up a piece of curriculum with them, and I don't know where the day went. And there's still things that we didn't get to do. So whether it's preparing food for dinner, making breakfast together, baking something, putting together that remote control car, doing board games, going outside for a hike, going to a park, meeting someone for a field trip at a playground, doing a play date with a friend, or just taking care of our chickens. There's always something to fill up our day. Trying something new. We did ice skating this week. That was cool. We also went to a medical freedom rally. So these were all just awesome experiences that I get to put in my quarterly report for my son, check off that box so that they can get their appropriate funding. And really, it's enriching his life so much. Even a car ride with your child. I mean, if you put up the little map on where you're going, it'll show how far you have to get there. You can ask your child, okay, well, how many more minutes? How many minutes did we start with? Now, how many minutes do we have? These ongoing conversations. And what time is it? When you're going over how to tell time with your kid, reading directions on the street signs and what a stop sign means and what the red light means and the yellow and the green, talking about east and west and where's the sun right now? Can we figure out which way is east and west by where the sun is and looking at the clock and figuring out the time? These conversations are the curriculum. So I really just want parents to focus on that. Now, part of the homeschooling process is deschooling. I've been thinking a lot about that. I might not have all of the answers on how to homeschool your children because my kids are still young. And I've had 100 conversations now with homeschooling families, but I can't speak to the best way to do it because I haven't yet done it with my child. I can just tell you what I've learned along the way. But I have looked into deschooling. That is something that, I really think parents need to understand that they do have to go through that process, because if you replicate school at home, there's no point in bringing them home. It's going to be a failure anyway. You guys are going to fight. So the way I look at it as the first year of homeschooling is replicating school at home, and nobody can understand why this is so stressful, and yet everybody on Instagram tells you how wonderful it is. Second year of homeschooling is like your unschooling year. You're just throwing your hands up. Life is school. We're just living each day how we want to live it, discovering things, learning about nature, learning about ourselves, and really just enjoying being a family. And then your third year and beyond are where you've kind of figured out who your homeschooling groups are, who your friends are, who your tribe is, what sort of subjects interest your child, what they want to learn further, what their learning style is. This is really where you're kind of figuring out what your day-to-day looks like. And it'll change. If not year to year, then probably month to month. But that's okay. That is beautiful because it shouldn't be the same. The best advice ever given to me was find a good book list. Most of you are probably familiar with Read Aloud Revival, Sarah Mackenzie. She has amazing book lists. I know there's others out there. That's just the one I've been using. You can contact your library and see if they have an app where you can just order the books from the book list to come directly to your library. So I'll do that once a month. I put in a ton of books from the book list. It's winter right now, so I'll put in winter books. What does the farm look like in winter? And all these different books about winter, or books that are really relevant to my son who's 6 years old, or an interest that he has, or a holiday that's coming up. This has been such an amazing way to homeschool, and it's free. You don't have to worry about the curriculum. Do I like the curriculum? Do I not like the curriculum? Is it working for my child? Nope, none of that. It's free book lists and free library usage. So this is the key, I think, to really discovering what your child's interests are and what their learning style is. And there's nothing better that you can do for your child than reading to them every day. Just having them hear story is so amazing, and they're missing out on that in school. Okay, so how do we deschool ourselves? I talked about it in the beginning, and I think recognizing that the school system was never designed to benefit your child is the first step. If you doubt your ability to teach your child, why are you trusting the institution that educated you? If they didn't do a good job on you, why would they do any better with your kid? So if you don't feel equipped to teach your child, just know that you don't have to teach them everything. You just have to guide them on how to find information. And it's never been easier. And we definitely don't want to replicate school at home. Learning should be holistic. Blend subjects into natural experiences. And it sounds a lot harder than it is, but once you're in it, you'll realize this is quite easy. All right, we do have to redefine what value means to us. What is value? Why are we educating our kids to begin with? What's the point? Do you want them to get a good job? What is a good job to you? Is it a lot of money? Is it nights and weekends off? Is it holidays off? Is it good health benefits? What does having a good job mean to you? Because I had all that stuff and I wasn't happy. I'll tell you, I am a lot happier now. I probably work a lot harder with my podcast, but I am happy because I'm doing something that's fulfilling. And my kids are seeing me learn and figure out, well, how do I start a podcast? And how do I make this video work? How can I edit this? How can I learn marketing? I wrote a book last year on how to teach your kids how to handle emergencies. I mean, that was just important to me. I figured, I don't care if he knows how to read and write. Does he know how to call 911 from someone's cell phone if he needs to? So, it's redefining what is important to you. I would recommend starting a list. Write it down. What are your goals for educating your child? Do you want them to become a lifelong learner, an avid reader, someone who's very hands-on and can figure things out for themselves? Do you want them to become an entrepreneur, a business owner? Do you want them to be a government worker, to make change from within? But have an idea of what your goal is for them and then change it as they grow, and you can work together on that goal. I had reached a 6-figure salary, and I really had to step back and say, okay, they're printing the dollar every day. It's losing its value. If the dollar collapsed and I don't even have a pension when I go to retire at 60 years old, I wasted all those years with my kids in school while I was in a cubicle. And that didn't sit well with me. I wasn't going to let that happen. And it's really hard to see that when you're in it, but when you step out of it, it is a lot easier. And there are so many other ways that you can make money. So I'll get into that in a moment. But that's the other part of deschooling, is realize that there are creative solutions for parents. If you think you can't quit your job because you need the income, could you explore other ways to make an income? Is there something that you could do while your children come to work with you, like cleaning or elder care or walking dogs or working from home or taking in children, doing an online business? Can you alternate your schedule with your spouse? Can you utilize a co-op or family support or rely on another homeschooling family for help? There are so many ways that people can homeschool now. I've interviewed multiple single moms that work and homeschool their kids on my podcast. So it is definitely doable. You just have to think outside the box. And remember, your kids are only young for so many years. So it's not like you need to do without that income forever. As they get older, they get more independent with their work. So it's much easier to have them do an online school or a co-op or independent work when they're older while you're busy working. Lastly, for deschooling yourself, look at your priorities: family connection, nature, play, reading together, board games, hands-on experiences. This is where you really develop the love of learning. And that's really the goal. Right? That's why we want to educate our children. We want them to continue to learn for the rest of their lives. So if we can foster a love for learning, a deep family connection, and really an understanding of what hard work means and what pride means, I think you're going to be so happy with your decision to homeschool. In closing up, I just want to emphasize the importance of reclaiming your family's time and connection. Know that this has been stolen from you on purpose. There is an agenda behind it. And I know that sounds crazy, but there is. There's always been one. And it's definitely more apparent in the schools today, especially when you look at what some of the funding goes to and what is being pushed in the schools. So just know that that is by design, and us parents do need to take a stand. Homeschooling really allows children to grow into their own unique strengths, and when they're in the school system, they're robbed of that. You don't need to jump in full-fledged if you're not a homeschooler yet. You don't have to make the decision to homeschool for the entirety of your child's education, but you can take small steps and say, well, I'm going to pull them out now and homeschool the rest of the year, or we're just going to homeschool for next year and see how it goes. Start small, grab books from a book list, live doing your everyday life together, and see where that takes you. Get outside in nature, make friends in the homeschooling community, and work on projects together, because you will be surprised at how much you actually learn doing a project. Sit down and write that goal for why you want to educate your child at all. and come back to it often. We think it's always been this way, but that's because no one has told us any different. Just like if you were born in 2015, you think the internet has always been here. And those of us that were born in the 80s realized that no, there was a time without the internet. So just as there was a time without the internet, there was also a time without the institution of the education system. We can bring our children home to educate them. It's how it's always been done. School is the experiment. You have everything you need to give your child a fantastic childhood. You just need time, attention, patience, and love. And I think you'll find that you get just as much out of it as your child does. I hope you'll check out the podcast for more inspiring stories from homeschoolers.